Hi everyone, welcome to Cobalt Crochet Tutorials. Today I'm showing you all the tricky parts of the Kalispell cardigan. As you can see here, I've worked up the body of the sweater and I've worked the ribbing on the bottom. And to follow along with this free pattern, you can just click the link in the description box below this video, that way you know what I'm talking about. So again, I finished the body, finished all the ribbing on the bottom of the sweater, and once you finish the ribbing on the bottom, you'll just fasten off. And now it's time to place some stitch markers, because this is where the tricky part starts happening. So I have 2 stitch markers, and I'm going to find the spot on either of these 2 panels, and see right by the neckline where the increases stop and it forms a straight line. Right where that little bump where the increases stop, we're going to place a stitch marker right at that edge. So you'll count the rows as your pattern tells you to, and then place your stitch marker. Now we'll do the same thing on the other side. So now I have 2 stitch markers, 1 on each side, right where those increases stop. Now I'm going to take my larger of the 2 crochet hooks, and you'll find all the materials in the pattern. So I'm using 6mm, that's what I needed to get the gauge. And I'm going to go to the bottom of my sweater, and on the left panel, that bottom corner, I'm going to join my yarn. Those stitch markers are just to help guide us when we start working the edging and the collar, so those will come in handy. So at this very bottom left corner of this cardigan, I'm just going to insert my hook, and then I pull the yarn through the fabric and slip stitch. Alright, so now my yarn's joined. Now I'm going to chain 1 and start single crocheting evenly across this left edge of the cardigan. So just working even single crochets. And we're going to stop working our single crochets evenly when we get to that stitch marker on this panel. So single crochet all the way up to that stitch marker, and then stop. And once we get to that stitch marker, it's time to start working our collar. So I've single crocheted evenly up to this stitch marker. Well, just about anyway. So I'll work those last couple stitches. Now I'm at my stitch marker, so you can take that out. And now we're going to start working our collar. So right where that stitch marker was, we're going to work a slip stitch. Now we're going to chain 2, and in the second chain from our hook we're going to work 1 half double crochet. So now we're kind of working a ribbing for the collar. And to get you familiar with this ribbing technique, it's the same ribbing we used on the bottom of this cardigan. I have a video, and here's the little link for it if you want to check that out, and that will really help you to work this collar because we're using that same ribbing concept. So before you continue watching this video, I strongly advise you check that ribbing tutorial out. Okay, so I've worked 1 half double crochet in the second chain for my hook, and now along this rough edge I'm going to slip stitch 2, working evenly, so just kind of where stitches should go. And then I'm going to turn this little bump, this half double crochet, and I'm going to work 2 half double crochets into the stitch, but I'm going to work in the 3rd loop only. So here's the half double crochet I just worked, and in that 3rd loop I'm going to work 2 half double crochets. Again, if you're already kind of lost on this collar, please watch that ribbing tutorial. Now I'm going to chain 1 and turn my flat back over. So now my stitch count is 2. I have 2 half double crochets right here and here. Now I'm going to work 1 half double crochet in the 3rd loop only in each of these stitches. So here's my first half double crochet, and there is its corresponding 3rd loop. So I'm going to work half double crochet into there. And then this last 3rd loop is kind of tricky to find, but you'll kind of see 3 bars, 1, 2, 3, and I like to work in the middle bar. It's not technically the 3rd loop, but I find that looks better in the end result. Now I can slip stitch again to that rough edge, and again where this kind of lines up, we're going to want to slip stitch right there. It should all fit nice and smoothly. Then slip stitch one more. And now I can turn my flap again. Now I'm going to work my half double crochets in the third loop only again, and my stitch count is still 2. So I'll find that first third loop, which I'll show you is right here. And then in the second stitch, the third loop is right here. And now I'm going to work 2 half double crochets into there, into that third loop. This increases again. So now I have a total of 3 half double crochets. And every time you increase, your stitch count is just going to go up 1. So now I'm going to turn my flap back over, chain 1, and work 1 half double crochet in the third loop only in each stitch across. So we're alternating rows of increase and rows of non-increase. Right now we're on a non-increase row. So I've worked my half double crochets. It's time to slip stitch again to the rough edge. So there's 1. There's my second slip stitch. And we're just going to continue like that. So turn your work and work your half double crochets in the third loop only. Remember, we have 3 stitches now. And in that last stitch, I'm going to work my increase in the third loop. So just remember, every 2 rows you'll gain another stitch. So again, I'm just going to continue like this. So now I'm on a non-increase row. So I'll just work across in the third loop only. And I currently have 4 stitches. So it's helpful to keep track of your stitch counts. So now, here's where I've worked, and you can kind of see that ribbing start to form. It's got a little knit look, which I think is super cool. And so we're going to stop this pattern of increasing, because we're generally increasing right now. Remember where we alternate increase rows and non-increase rows? That whole sequence we are going to stop once we get to not this first row of eyelets, but this second strip of eyelets. So we're going to work just as I've been showing you, all the way across here, past this first string of eyelets, all the way across, and then once you get to the second string of eyelets right here, we're going to stop right at this corner. So just continue like I've been showing you. And this is the sleeve portion right here. So continue in that increasing format as I showed you, all the way across the sleeve, and then once you get to that second string of eyelets, if you can see that, at that little divot corner right there, stop your increases right there. So I'll see you when we get there. So we're nearing that stopping point. I've worked, as I showed you, across all the way to that first section of eyelets. Then I continued, and now I'm near the second section of eyelets right here. So I just have 1 or 2 more rows. This last row will probably do it. So I've finished up that row, and now I'm going, that was an increase row, so now I'm going to chain 1 and work my normal row. And so once we've reached that point, remember that second string of eyelets where I told you to stop, now we're just going to not increase, where every row is just going to be normal half double crochets, third loop only, all the way across. So we're still working the same ribbing, it just we aren't going to do any increases. So every row is just half double crochet, third loop only across. So just continue, and we aren't working any increases. And then we will work this pattern of not doing any increases, and we'll continue that until we get to the next string of eyelets. So all the way across this back of the cardigan, and then once you get to that string of eyelets, we will stop working in that no increase, no decrease way. So continue working no increases, just 1/2 double crochet in the third loop only across, and continue that until you reach this string of eyelets, and we'll stop right there, and I'll show you what to do next. Okay, I've worked up to that section of eyelets I told you about, and it's important to end that last row away from that fabric. So my working loop is opposite the fabric, not ending on a row where I slip stitch to the fabric, and so my working loop's over here. You want your working loop to be on the opposite end over here. Okay, now we are going to start decreasing, and we'll stop decreasing once we reach that other stitch marker. So chain 1, and if you haven't turned, be sure to turn your work. I'll start off this row by working a decrease in the third loop only. So 1/2 double crochet 2 together in the third loop only. So I started by yarning over, insert in that first third loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, insert my hook in the next third loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all the loops on your hook. So that's a decrease in the third loop only. Now I'll work 1/2 double crochets in the third loop only across till I get to the end of this row. And this is similar to when we were increasing every other row. Now we'll just be decreasing every other row until you get to that next stitch marker. Don't forget about that last stitch right there. Now every other row our stitch count will be going down 1. Slip stitch accordingly. 2 slip stitches. Now turn your collar and work. Now this is a regular row, so no decreases. We'll work 1/2 double crochet in the third loop only across, and hopefully you can already see kind of the point here. It's just like the side where we increased, now we'll be decreasing, and we'll work those decreases every other row. Okay, so that was a regular row. Chain 1, turn your work, in that first 2 stitches work your third loop only decrease. And continue in the third loop only. So this is one of those things, it looks complicated in the written pattern, but it's really a pretty simple concept. So that's why I love offering these video tutorials, so that you can just instantly see what's going on through a visual. Okay, so I'll just continue like that all the way till that next stitch marker, working 1 decrease every other row. And after you've worked to that stitch marker, you'll just single crochet evenly all the way to the end of this ribbing corner, and then it'll mirror exactly the other side of this cardigan. So again, once you get to that stitch marker, single crochet evenly down this edge all the way to the very end, and then you can fasten off your work. I worked my collar to where the stitch marker should mark the spot, and I have 1 stitch left, and you're going to want to make sure you chain 1 and turn accordingly. And then once you're at your last part of collar, because you've reached your stitch marker, slip stitch again evenly. Just once should do it, just to really smooth out that transition from the edging to the collar. Then you can start working your single crochets evenly down to the very corner end of this sweater. So the ribbing for the collar is all done, and that's pretty exciting. The next tricky part of this pattern I want to show you is when you are starting your sleeves. So honestly, there's a couple tricky things about this. One tricky thing is at the end of the sleeve when you are doing the cuff ribbing, and the cuff ribbing itself isn't complicated at all. It's just like the other ribbing we've been doing, pretty simple, no increases, no decreases, but seaming it together can get a bit tough. So I will show you that lastly, but before I do, I'm going to show you how to start the sleeve, which is the other kind of tricky portion if you're just trying to read it in a pattern. So I have my sleeve hole here. I've worked my other sleeve, as you can tell, and I'm going to grab just the 6mm hook or whatever one was bigger to get the gauge. You don't want the small one here. Then I'm going to make a slip knot, and I'm going to join my yarn. Now it's important to know exactly where to join it. So here is the top, here is the bottom. So we will be joining our yarn right here. So slide that slip knot onto your hook, and now at the bottom of that sleeve right here, you'll see that we worked a chain 2 space to create this sleeve hole, if you remember that from the body of this sweater. Then we worked 2 double crochets into that chain 2 space, and those are right here. And so now this is upside down because that's how the sweater works. And so in between those 2 double crochets that were worked into the chain 2 space, I'm going to insert my hook right in between those 2 double crochets, then yarn over, pull through, and pull the first loop through the second loop. So now it's all joined, and then your pattern will tell you to chain 2, and it'll tell you to work 2 double crochets evenly up to the first unworked double crochet. So let's find the first unworked double crochet. We're kind of working into a sideways stitch right here, and then you can see nice normal stitches starting right here. So this is our first unworked stitch. So until we get there, we're going to need to work 2 double crochets evenly. Try to space them out as best you can. Doesn't really matter though, because this is under the arm, so it's not going to be super visible. But you still want to do the best you can to make it not holey or gappy. Then we're at our first unworked stitch, and then you'll continue with what the pattern says. It may tell you to double crochet 2 together, depends on the size. And then you'll continue following the pattern for this first round of the sleeve all the way around. At the end of your row, you'll work 2 double crochets evenly down to that chain 2. So just like the beginning. Then slip stitch to that chain 2, and don't forget to turn your work after every round of the sleeves. Then you can just continue on your way all the way down for the rest of the sleeve pattern. Now I'm going to show you how to seam up the cuff once you've worked the ribbing here, and you'll get a really nice, almost invisible join, and it's going to fit in really smoothly with the rest of this knit look. Okay, so I've worked my ribbing all the way around this perimeter of the cuff. And so once you've done your last row, you want to make sure you end on a row where your working loop is away from the sleeve. So my working loop is opposite where all my sleeve is. It's not on the close side, it's on the far side. Don't chain 1 after you work that last row. So now we're going to join these 2 pieces together, and we're going to work a seam down the side. But first we're going to fold this cuff inside out and then line up the edges. Like so. So now I kind of have a cuff, it's inside out, and I'll be seaming down into here. So first you want to slip stitch to that first little spot right over here. And it's kind of an indistinct stitch because this edge is the first row of ribbing we worked, and so these are just the bottom loops of chains. So as far over as you can to this edge, we're just going to slip stitch. And that'll ensure that it's all lined up when we're done, this perimeter. Now I have on the other edge, this is the last row of half double crochets I worked. So I still have the regular tops of the V's, and then I have those third loops. I'm still going to be working into the third loops even for this part. So insert your hook into that third loop, find that first bottom loop of that chain that you didn't work into when you did that first row. Yarn over, pull through both those loops, pull the first loop through the second loop. We'll just repeat that all the way down. So again, insert into the third loop only on this close edge. On the next edge, find that next bottom loop of the chain, pull through both, and slip stitch. Again, my sleeve is inside out right now, at least just this cuff part. So it's going to be a little tricky once you get down into here, but just keep repeating that all the way down until there's no gap left. Find that next bottom loop of the chain, insert in the third loop, find the next chain, repeat that all the way down. Now I'm getting closer to the really deep inside of this, so It's going to be harder to see distinctly where to go into, but I still see a gap right there that needs to be seamed. So the most important thing is to make sure you keep on seaming until there's no gap left. And when in doubt, just go a little farther with your seaming, more than you think you'll need to, just so you make sure there's no hole left. So I think that's about it, but I'm just going to make one more slip stitch generally in here somewhere, just to make sure. Now I'm going to fasten off my yarn, then flip this cuff right side out, and you're all set. And look at that beautiful ribbing. We still have that row of V's, even though this right here is our seam. So pretty unnoticeable. If you look closely, you can tell it's slightly different, but on the whole, I'll take it. I think it's pretty good. So you are all done with your sleeve, and we're all done with this video. Those are pretty much all the unique and tricky parts of the Kalispell cardigan. Be sure to follow along on my Instagram, Cobalt Crochet, so you can see all of the pattern testers' work on the Kalispell cardigan and see what colors they chose to make theirs. Thanks so much for watching this video. Please like this video, and if you'd like to help support my channel, please just click that red subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching again, and have a great day.